Hello, and thank you for joining us at Turkish-American Hour. We are joined today by our co-host Danny Nsouli, who has his own show reviewing movies about superheroes, video games, and all the like, called Master Reviews.
All right, so my name is Danny, as you said. I have a YouTube channel called Master Reviews, and on there I do movie reviews, but I also do video essays talking a little bit more about the filmmaking of such movies. I like to focus a lot more on the big blockbuster movies. I feel like that's where my passion lies. I just like seeing how those big franchises, evolve and change over time, the pitfalls and where they succeed. And recently I started an Instagram page as well at master.reviews. And for that I do more quick reviews because, with the amount of movies coming out and blockbusters, it's hard to stay on top of it with a video every time. So this is more a way to give my audience a quick way to see my thoughts on something.
Yeah, there definitely is a lot of them. I mean, they're nonstop, right? Phase 4 has gone into the nether world sometimes. But what got you into movie making? I understand your background is in software and animation and stuff like that. How'd you get into movies?
I would say because my background is in software, this all went back to video games. And because of that, I felt like, as a kid, I was always inspired by the storytelling within video games and kind of making my own stories by controlling the player characters, because back in the day, there wasn't too many cinematics in games, especially in the Nintendo 64 era. So it was all up to your imagination to kind of, figure things out. And I think through that, I just enjoy the art of storytelling. And then seeing some movie like Toy Story, that also helped inspire me with the animation. And then I made that jump. Animation can be used in video games, and then it can also be used in films, and something like Toy Story 3 can make, everyone in the audience cry and feel emotion. So a lot of those things kind of combined.
Who was crying in
art.
Toy Story 3? I don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely. Cinematics have definitely been incorporated into filmmaking a lot, or video games a lot more over the years. Hard to do cinematics in a 2D environment, side scroller, right? But a lot of those games were still kind of rooted in some of the themes that you explore on your channel and your reviews, with a lot of kind of the narrative structure. And you are very keen about not just the animation and the cinematography side of film production, but also the storytelling aspect, the narratives that are being shared. What are some of your favorite stories in that kind of genre, so to speak, of the heroes and the action and all that?
I think for me, I really like, those classic underdog tales. So something like Spider-Man was one of the first movies that I watched, and I'm talking about, Spider-Man 1, like the very first one that came out. And I feel like just watching someone like that, like Peter Parker, who's kind of this, lowly, nerdy guy. He doesn't really have much going for him at the time, but then when he becomes Spider-Man, you really see his true character blossom. So I feel like something like that is very inspiring. And then now we can see how much it's evolved through all these different superhero characters, the iterations on the same story. And this also goes for something like Star Wars, where George Lucas, the creator, kind of popularized that style of storytelling where it's kind of the same structure, and they've used it a lot in recent blockbusters, Marvel, Star Wars, DC, all these movies, and it's just a formula that works. Like, it's stood the test of time as well.
Yeah, the trilogy seems to be much more present nowadays than it ever was before. Back in the day, it was sequels, and we just thought they might come out in perpetuity. But now it's we know that they're going for a trilogy when they release the first one, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and I totally understand that. I resonate with Peter Parker as well, and the whole Spider-Man thing. And Spider-Man and Superman have some parallels there too as well. Both were reporters, and they absolutely kind of fall back onto that heroic journey that Lucas kind of popularized with Star Wars. Can you talk a little bit about how has the narrative aspect of that evolved as the special effects have gone through the roof?
That is true. I do think beforehand it was a lot more simple. You knew who the heroes were immediately. This goes all the way back to very old, serials people would watch maybe in like the 1930s. And it's that same kind of idea about this person who goes into some sort of fantasy world, they discover some power, some sort of magic, something, and then with that are able to conquer their enemies and then go back to their original village or kingdom or whatever and share that with the common man, save people. So I think with that, it's kind of been iterated on multiple times. And then now you have some of these characters, like the mentor character, the hero character. Sometimes it's a little bit gray, who is who, but you can still see those archetypes kind of shown through in some of these more recent movies. Like something like Iron Man, he may not have a mentor, but he still, watches videos of his father and he learns from that. And then he has, people like Nick Fury, who's the guy who assembles all the heroes together, and he's kind of like a mentor figure.
Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to exit the donut.
I told you I don't want to join your super secret boy band.
Obi-Wan is the classic mentor in Star Wars, so I feel like they've just kind of taken these same characters, the same story structure, and then kind of just changed it a little bit, but at its core, it's the same, and that's why I think it's been succeeding so many times.
Absolutely, and it's you bring up Nick Fury and Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan's hit on Disney Plus right now, and Nick Fury was played by a guy who starred in both kind of franchises, right? He was Mace Windu in Samuel L. Jackson was Mace Windu in Star Wars. And Star Wars, however, in that pantheon, like Obi-Wan, has a much more classic hero's journey in the Star Wars vein. But then there's shows like The Mandalorian, which they kind of play around with some, the hero's journey is still there, right? But they play around with some different archetypes of like Westerns and stuff like that as well. A little bit of moral ambiguity thrown in there. How do you see this blending where do you think this like blending of genres kind of started? Can you talk a little bit about like maybe a time period or like a movie that you really caught your attention when you first like saw this kind of fusion of genres happening?
I would say there are some superhero movies that I think try to emulate those older films, and because they're doing that, they merge together. So something like Logan, which was the last Wolverine movie, a lot of people were saying, oh, it's like a Western kind of, because it doesn't follow exactly the same structure as a normal superhero movie. And something like The Dark Knight, people don't even call it a superhero movie in some terms, they call it a crime drama. Mm-hmm. So there is a lot of meshing, and something like Doctor Strange, which recently came out, that movie, Doctor Strange 2, goes more into the horror aspects of things. And you can see even in something like the Turkish box office, usually these hero tales always succeed. And now you can see from the past few weeks, Doctor Strange 2 and even the recent Harry Potter spin-off film, Secrets of Dumbledore, these two films dominated the box office each. And I think that's all because, they're all kind of from the same mold. This kind of person who has a power, can do something with it. And they're different genres, but it's that same idea.
They're touching on universal themes, right? That kind of have,
exactly.
And especially with the way the box office is kind of designed in the modern era. It's a global box office. Many films that don't succeed to their best abilities in the domestic box office, they kill it overseas, in places like Turkey and places like China, and it's definitely, absolutely, because those archetypes have existed for a long time. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some like characters and heroes that have caught your attention because they are very like close to maybe some of those, much closer than let's say Batman, right? Batman's kind of like a version of a Hades, but he's not so explicit. But there are other characters that are, Thor is like he is Thor. He is a character of Norse mythology outright. But can you talk a little bit about some characters that like really have always kind of attracted your attention because they're kind of mimics or doppelgangers in a sort of way, or an evolution of one of those like ancient myths or ancient archetypes?
I would say someone like Captain America. That's kind of a character I feel like, especially because he was born so long ago, but he's like that classic Boy Scout good type character. And Superman is someone who is very famous before for his original films. And he kind of matches the same energy as our modern day Captain America, and some would argue even more than our modern day Superman, which hasn't been as successful as these Captain America films. So it's interesting to see how you can kind of take the same archetype, just put it in a new mold, but because the storytelling is so much better, then people will flock to it more because it may also remind them of something they've seen in the past that they've enjoyed. I think that's a big deal because a lot of times, they also try to do these anti-hero films or these villain films, but the Boy Scout, good person film, it still kind of comes out on top in the end, I guess, because it's more general.
Yeah, I remember the original Superman trilogy. We'll ignore Superman 3 with Richard Pryor, but Superman 2 is still arguably hailed as one of, if not the best, many people might argue that it's the best superhero film ever. And it sticks out because it kind of humanizes the main character, right? I mean, he has the alter ego as Clark Kent, and it really focuses on how to relate to the human side of the human experience and stuff like that, because here's this almost godlike being in Superman, but how does he cope with his existence on Earth and his trials and tribulations? And yeah, Captain America definitely kind of echoes that, right? Except it humanizes him even more. He's actually not a god, he is a human who is given these kind of godlike powers. And that's kind of, very close to like Hercules, right? Hercules was a demigod, and he had to go through his like 12 labors and stuff to prove his worth and atone for his sins, so to speak. What are some character arcs that have like, dabbled in that kind of atonement? Or you mentioned the focus on villains and the anti-heroes recently. What are some anti-heroes or villain stories that have like really stuck out to you in the past couple years?
I feel like for me, one of the best villains in that Marvel universe may have been Magneto. I really liked seeing the way that character has changed across films. Sometimes it's done poorly, but in the films that it's done well, you understand his struggle, and that's that, there are regular people and there are mutants in this world who have these superpowers, and he feels like the mutants are discriminated. And people say this is, a metaphor for things that are happening in the real world with racism and such. And he's a villain because he wants to, conquer, us regular people who don't have superpowers. But he doesn't see the bad in what he's doing. But he has somewhat good intentions, I would say. And even someone like Iron Man, starts out as someone who, delivers weapons manufacturer.
A contentious hero, right?
Yeah. And he also, like you said, he goes through his own punishment in order to turn into a hero, because when he gets captured by terrorists, he understands who he's giving the weapons to, where they're going if they're stolen. He understands all the ramifications of that. And then, when he creates his own suit, he's more of a symbol for peace than anything. So
right.
That's like something where, it could be a mythological tale because he's going through all this struggle, and then the hero is born out of that, and he has to make himself the hero.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's definitely some like Perseus vibes with Iron Man and whatnot. So one of the other things that you review, or one of the other aspects that you review on your channel, is kind of the incorporation of like the production quality and production side of things and how that affects the narrative medium. Can you talk a little bit about some movies that have stuck out, or series, shows, or maybe even video games that have stuck out to you recently where they utilize the full power of kind of that production side of things, cinematography, animation, sound design, music, and like soundtrack score and stuff like that. Can you talk about some titles that maybe have stuck out to you over the past couple years?
Sure. Recently, actually, there's been a new Marvel series on Disney Plus called Miss Marvel, and that one, because it's being told by a high school girl, they use a lot of animation in the storytelling, although it's live action. So I thought that was very surprising to see, because in most of these Marvel properties, I feel like they try to stick to the same cookie cutter mold. They don't want to get too outside of the box because they're afraid of alienating new viewers and old viewers. So seeing something as the girl just describing her dreams of wanting to be an Avenger, which is part of that superhero group, and then seeing it all done in animation was really cool. And it was all just from her drawings of the notebook, but come to life. So the way they showed that, and then even there are some smaller scenes where her and her friend are just biking across town, and they're talking about what they're gonna do for the day, and you can see in the sky or on buildings the paint, the graffiti, it kind of changes to form what they're talking about. So these are small things, even like text messages when they're texting each other. Normally in movies, you just see the bubble come up, and it's a very not creative way of showing that. But in that show, they'll have the text message appear on a neon sign on a store. It's not exactly the most realistic thing, but for us, it's more entertaining to see. Or like the message will pop up on the road or something in paint. So I think that's something I noticed, which was a really creative way of using animation in a live action series. Yeah,
there's definitely a fusion of kind of abstract art forms kind of bleeding into the narrative style, right? As you mentioned, text messages, usually it's just they show like little screen grabs of and then put them on the screen, and it's like not very original, absolutely. But animation does definitely seem to be opening up new avenues for not just fused storytelling, but also kind of different perspectives, right? Now, with your background in software and animation, where do you kind of see this stuff going, and how does it feed back into, how does this enhance the whole archetypal narrative, right? Because those are still going to be around, but is there value in just keeping the classics as classic and, maybe trying to harken back as much as possible to oratory? Or do you think that where the technology is going to be taking us now is going to kind of open greater frontiers to maybe engage and be more immersed in these like classical heroes' journeys and stuff like that?
That's a good question, because I feel like the future right now is a little bit uncertain, because a lot of times something as big as these Marvel films or these DC superhero films, they get a lot of criticism for their CGI, their computer generated images, because they don't look as real as they should. And I think it's because we have so much power that we're using that constantly, that it's almost, we don't know the limit of where we should use it. Right now, Spider-Man, the character, whenever you see him in the suit, it's all CGI. It's not like a real person is actually there. And there are other movies that do it better, where they will use the practical suit or effect, but they'll put CGI on top of it. But because they have a reference there, it looks more real. So I hope they go more in that direction, and I think CGI will get better, as it goes. But overall, something like that, I'm still unsure how much these movie studios will abuse it in order to not have to pay money.
Absolutely. There's that Uncanny Valley, right? Where something is believable until it's not. And then that Uncanny Valley is quite wide to get over to bridge it until we get to the other side where things look realistic and believable again.
This place looks weird. Where are we? think we're in the valley. The Uncanny Valley.
The what?
Do you remember that weird animation style in the early 2000s where everything looked real but nothing looked right?
Oh yeah, that stuff was creepy.
Well, I think this is where they ended up.
You know, you talk about the practicals. I love use of practicals as well. In the modern era, contemporary stuff, Mandalorian has used practicals. His suit is quite practical, but what sticks out most to me is Ahsoka Tano, right? Her costume is by and large practical, and I think that really plays in. I think that on the production side, that helps the actors and the talent kind of get into character, because it's one thing to be in the costume and to feel things tangibly, and it's a whole different thing when you have to imagine what's going on in the background. And yeah, a lot of the technology nowadays, starting with like what James Cameron started from Avatar, right? Helping to kind of see the CG stuff live as it's being shot. But I think one of the other masters of that was Steven Spielberg, right? Jurassic Park is classic, and he got his start, with Jaws and the badly malfunctioning animatronic shark, which created one of the most classic cinematic moments in history. It was because it was a bad animatronic shark that he didn't want to show the shark, don't show the bad guy, and it just, with those two notes in that Jaws theme, it ended up being like a really great tension builder, right? And he harkened back to that in Jurassic Park. He used the same kind of gaffe or trick, cinematic trick, to create that tension for Jurassic Park. You want to talk a little bit about what artists or what directors and what filmmakers have kind of influenced your kind of own personal take on storytelling and filmmaking?
Sure. I would definitely say Jordan Peele. I think is one of the more modern filmmakers that I felt inspired by, and that's because he always says that when he writes a movie, he tries to do it when he's having fun. So if he's writing something, he said he's written a script before about a Chupacabra movie, which a lot of people want to see, but he said because he was writing it and it wasn't fun, that he just gave up on it and went on to a new project. And then now he has that new project, Nope, coming on later this year. So he's definitely one of the screenwriters that I like, inspired by. Sam Raimi also, who directed the old Spider-Man movies. I love his use of practical effects and making everything feel so raw and visceral. It's also something I feel like we lose with the new CGI characters and everything is, when people get hurt, you don't really feel it. You don't really see, the practical, blood and effects as much. So it makes the action feel less real.
Right.
So I would say those are, two of the creators that I look up to. Also, Vince Gilligan, who's written the Breaking Bad series. He has really great ideas on how to make a story continually interesting, talking about how he doesn't like to make villains, become dumb. He likes them to be smart all the way through, and then the way to take them down is just more satisfying. So things like that. I watch a lot of videos on these people and things they have to say, advice they've learned. I feel like that's really good for people like me who are aspiring filmmakers.
Thank you, Danny, again for joining us and giving us your insight on movie reviews. Would you like to add anything?
I would just say you can follow me on YouTube at Master Reviews or Instagram at master.reviews if you want to see more of my videos and my takes on different releases. And it's been my pleasure being here. Love talking about this stuff.
Yeah, thanks again, Danny. Be sure to check them out at Master Reviews on YouTube. All right, thank you for joining us. We will be back later to talk more about the trajectory of the movie industry and especially these classic hero archetypes and superhero movies and stories. Thanks again.